Thank you for tuning in to Koppen with Comic. I'm Brian Koppen, and we're with comic Joe Gorman. Joe Gorman, how the hell are you?
Good, man. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on, and kind of where can people normally find you do stand-up comedy in New York City when that starts up, and where can they find you in the meantime doing online comedy?
Absolutely, man. Hey, as soon as this epidemic ends, I'll be back at all your favorite locations. I'll be at the Stand NYC in Union Square. I'll be at the Creek in the Cave. I'll be at clubs and colleges throughout the New York State area as soon as it comes back.
You're gonna be hitting it super hard, I take it.
Oh, absolutely, man. I feel like a caged animal right now, just waiting to get out and feel the exhilaration. But in the meantime, you can catch me online. I regularly have comedy open mics and showcases that I host and produce. You can add me on Facebook, facebook.com/Joe Gorman. And I'll regularly post my Zoom shows there. Drop in, hang out. If you want to do material, do material. We're just trying to make the best of the situation. I also have a podcast that I do with two other New York comedians, Robbie Goodwin and Dalton Pruitt. It's called The Loud Boys, and that's on every media outlet that has podcasts. You can find it, man.
I'm totally interested in kind of what's been working with digital comedy. But in the meantime, before we get to that, tell me about the kind of the idea behind Loud Boys Comedy.
Well, that's really just trying to capture the green room atmosphere that comics usually have, where before you're going up and doing a set, or like right after you're done doing a set, talking shop, talking about current events, really just trying to touch base with one another and get a sense of community in these times.
That's the theory. Yeah. That's the theory behind this whole podcast. Because I was like, how do I get to riff with comedians without going to a single comedy club? And this was how I do it.
This is perfect timing, man.
Yeah. And so now everybody's much more available to talk, and it's just it's so cool to be able to talk to Joe Gorman, who seems to be the one of the innovators in the online space post Corona. So kind of what I've seen you're doing a lot of shows online, and what can you tell me about what works and what doesn't? Kind of what did you start off trying, and what did you evolve to become?
Well, one thing I started doing when I first started, I was just trying to transcribe my normal stage act in front of a webcam, and it just doesn't work as much. Because it's different, and we have to acknowledge that doing stand-up online is different than doing stand-up in an audience. You don't have the same energy because you can feed off an audience's energy, but it's possible. I think if you can see the people laughing on Zoom, you're doing something right. My new style is kind of accepting that and addressing it as soon as I'm going up. As soon as they unmute me and say, "Here's Joe Gorman," I address the fact that, man, I'm sitting down. I'm sitting down in front of my computer doing comedy, and normally I'm pacing back and forth on stage, like a young Eddie Murphy or something,
Joe Gorman is the white Eddie Murphy.
Absolutely.
You've heard it here first.
Yeah.
And so, and I think like I saw some of the Saturday Night Live sketches with respect to the whole, Zoom thing. Like first they did the Weekend Update where they had a laugh track, and I thought that was, or they had people laughing to the Weekend update jokes, and I thought that was so awful I had to turn it off. And sure enough, the next week they stopped that entirely, which was great.
Yeah.
And then but then also I guess there was a sketch where Keenan played a preacher, and everybody in the audience was able to kind of chime in with their amens, and it got distracting for him. And so kind of you're able to see people laughing, and how from your point of view, what's that kind of like, or from the point of view of somebody who's just kind of watching it after the fact. I don't know if these things are also recorded. Is the laughter distracting at all? I know for you it must be energizing.
I mean, yeah, but it's also different, having an audience, and it's the same reason. Like, I think Keenan might have gotten a little stumbled upon because he's been doing this literally like 2/3 of his life from
Yeah,
all that to SNL. That's
yeah,
really the dream, to be
yeah,
able to be funny for your entire life and make a career out of it. So props to him for that. But it's what I liked about it was how awkward it was because it's like, welcome to my world. That was probably like the most genuine performance from all of them because like they were out of their element, and I think that's where a lot of people are right now. But the problem is like they didn't address how they kind of like winked and nod like, hey, we're all at home, but like to really address like this is kind of weird and we're
yeah,
doing the exact same thing every other comedian is doing. And now SNL, it was broadcast on, and it's broadcast on NBC, it's broadcast on the internet, but
yeah,
now pretty much everyone's Zoom is on like the only like the most consumable form of media is through the internet now. And
yeah.
I think it's kind of fair play because it's literally pretty much the same quality of work that these professional comedians are putting out compared to SNL and successful YouTubers.
Yeah,
I
that's
saw that.
that's funny.
Yeah,
It kind of drops SNL's production values down a notch to the point where,
definitely.
yeah, certain the Joe Gormans of the world are chumping them out in terms of quality.
Right. Where and it's a lot easier to get, bigger name comedians like Judah Friedlander
Yeah,
to drop in on your Zoom show than, rather than, oh, hey, I see you're in town. Would you like to make an additional stop and do a drop in set? There's so much more coordination with that, like
yeah,
transportation. Now it's like you turn on your laptop, click a few buttons, and then you're performing, and
yeah,
it's different. I think it puts a lot more emphasis on the written aspect of comedy as opposed to just the performative aspect because for a lot of people watching on a Zoom show, they only have a small little box of you performing. And even if you are on like the big screen, even if they blow up your screen, you're limited to your webcam or your smartphone, you
so
know?
even gesticulating with your hands or whatever is going to be a little bit less effective for certain people unless they, I guess in general, like you can't do your pacing around, you can't do the Eddie Murphy thing, and so you
Yeah.
better make sure that your jokes are on point.
Right. And and sometimes like the physicality is lost. Sometimes and a lot of it also depends on like your internet connection. So if you have a bad connection and like you stutter over something or there's a little bit of a delay, that can throw you off too.
Yeah,
Because sometimes you'll say a joke and it's almost like a news report where they say, and we're going to go live to the field with Robert. And then an awkward amount of time passes. Then Robert goes, thank you, Bob. I'm here. And it's like, dude, you come on, man. Can't you like estimate when this is ending?
yeah.
That time delay would always irritate me as a child because I didn't understand. And even as an adult who understands that we're literally sending thousands of megabytes of data at the speed of light and there's just a minor delay. That's still not enough. That's
And
still
I
not
like
good.
I like the fact that Joe Gorman, instead of the reporter in the field, the Joe Gormans and the comedians are just it's like they're more adaptable. It's like you guys have really had to adapt on the fly on stage before the virus, and so you guys are the people who are perfectly positioned to be creative with it, after the virus.
Yeah, man. Like like they say, necessity is the mother of invention.
Yeah,
And what it comes down to, do you want to adapt and figure out how to make comedy in this new world, or are you just gonna throw your hands up and say, well, I guess I wasted 13 years of my life trying to do stand-up comedy and make connections. Um, and it's and honestly, even if a lot of these places reopen, it might not be the same. Even
yeah.
like when these clubs open, there still are going to be groups of people that are apprehensive about going out to large social gatherings. I mean, not right now because we just lifted the ban, so of course everything is flooded right now. Like any bar that is open will have a ton of people. All of these news reports. So we're going to have a second wave. I'm
Oh yeah.
fairly sure. You've heard it here first, folks. There's going to be a second wave. So I was right to invest in a premium Zoom account right now. So
Yeah, I haven't heard second wave thrown around until Joe Gorman said it. So you heard it
that's
here
right.
first. I love
That's
it.
right.
But I think, even with the bars opening back up or whatever, certain comedians might hesitate to even do it. It's like, hey man, I can, I'm building this Zoom following or whatever.
Yeah.
At the very least, I think you're always going to supplement the more until it gets robust, until your schedule is packed with live comedy again. It's nice to know that you're going to be able to supplement it with internet.
Exactly. And and for a lot of people it's also convenience. If I'm able to do shows with people in San Francisco or even in New Jersey,
Yeah.
where normally, that would be a long commute or I'd have to schedule ahead of time. Now it's just making sure your time zones are all synced up. And I'm able to touch base with people I worked with back in San Francisco. Some of the connections I made during my time in New Jersey, all the New York comedians. A lot of people are, even if they don't love doing online shows, like they love getting laughs, they love connecting with their peers, and that's, I mean, at the heart of it, that's what stand-up comedy is making connections with people, either the connection with the audience or the connection with your peers.
Yeah,
Uh,
and I think, yeah, that's such a great point, because it's almost like now you're networking with all these people, your home, back to the San Francisco, New Jersey, but also if you want to, get your podcast going with guests in LA, it's like it's going to be so much easier to go out there post virus and be able to get some shows. And some of the, some of these comedians are probably like, why the fuck didn't I do this before?
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and especially now the evolution of the Zoom show was so fast. I think it took maybe like 2 or 3 weeks for people to really figure out how to market them, how to get people to chime in, how to coordinate, when to unmute an audience, because
Yeah.
I think we finally learned, like, it's funny because like 2 weeks ago was like the wild west of Zoom shows where they didn't really know how to mute the audience. People were, talking over other comics. Some comics didn't know how to get their webcam set up just right, or how to sync up a microphone with their computer and all of that. But now everyone's professional, now everyone has a beauty light. Everyone has a good HD webcam. Like we're all really becoming programming masters now out of necessity.
Yeah. The only way a comedian's going to become a programming master is to experience the virus. And how
Yeah.
are these people kind of muting the audience? Does the comedian have control of that? And so you're doing your joke, and then do you unmute it where you think there could be a laugh, or what?
Yeah. So what I typically do is, as a coordinator for the shows, I mute the audience during the comedian's performance, and I make a point of telling people beforehand, you know, um, if they see you smiling, if they see you like nodding your head, try to be as physical with your laughter as possible if you enjoy it. And then I unmute them near the end, and it's like, be sure to give a lot of noise and make people know that. Because like really that's what they want. They want that applause break at the end.
Oh,
But
okay.
if they see people laughing, I think that's great. I think that's what they really need. That's what I get through. I don't really need to hear the laughter, but seeing people react is just as good for me.
And how can you kind of accommodate that many? Like, if you have 10 comedians on a show or whatever,
Mhm.
and 20 audience members, do you only show the picture of the one comedian who's going, and then you show the 20 in the audience? Like, I imagine those boxes on Zoom get pretty small.
Oh yeah, they do. So what I do is I have there's a spotlight for the person talking, and that's what the audience sees. And then there's a second window where everyone's the audience and comedians are kind of laid out like a grid,
Yeah.
and that's what I tell the comics to focus on. Like focus on like this big Brady Bunch-esque mural of all these happy faces. And use that. And honestly, it's different too, because some comics they get more stage fright doing a Zoom show because in a way it's much more intimate.
Yeah.
You're on a stage, you're elevated, there's a spotlight. So chances are you're blind. You can rarely see people out beyond the third row. That's why most crowd work is done in like the first front rows. And that's why no one ever wants to sit in the front row. Now everyone's face is clearly illuminated. So on the plus side, you can see them laughing. On the downside, you can very clearly not see them laughing, or see them stop paying attention and go to a different window, because now you're not just competing with the other comics on the show, you're also competing with everything on the internet ever. So
Ah, But I love because it gives so much credit to the laugh. Like if you actually see somebody, demonstrably laughing or whatever, you're like, I just got that person, and they preferred me over every fucking streaming special on the internet.
That's right.
I love,
Exactly.
I love that. And so, and how many people in the audience can you accommodate on a screen though? Can it go up to 100, or is it usually, you're just doing 10 and they rotate or something?
I personally have not been in a show that's had more than 20 or 30 audience members.
Okay.
In which case, there's a second window and there's about 15 or so screens, and you can also shuffle through the screens so you can see different people.
Yeah.
Um, but I've heard of some people that were able to get 200 plus audience members, and I have no idea how they would even begin to do something like that. Maybe they lied to me. I don't know. But,
And then kind of
yeah.
how did you get that hustle? Because it sounds like I mean, were you doing stand-up comedy in San Francisco before you came here? And
Yeah.
what have you noticed as far as kind of the difference between the comedy scenes? And did it make sense to start out in San Francisco? Did you get enough stage time? And then how did when you came to New York, what was that like?
Yeah, I'm actually very grateful that I started in San Francisco. I was doing comedy in San Francisco for about 10 years because I started in about 2008, 2009. And yeah, it was a good community out there. It was very, very positive. Like San Francisco, there were some real heavy hitters that came out of San Francisco. When I started, Moshe Kasher was a regular at a lot of the clubs. Brent Weinbach, a lot. There were people on the up and up. Sammy Obeid, Ali Wong, she was a regular at the Punchline when I started out there. So there was a lot of great talent. There were good clubs out there. The San Francisco Punchline, Cobb's, the Purple Onion when it
Was
was
it
there.
was it was it tough to get on a show with Ali Wong? Like, did that same club also have open mic nights, or were you putting together house parties? Like, I remember there was a Flop House documentary
Yeah,
where
I
it
know
was
those guys. Yeah, yeah.
comedy houses everywhere, and I thought one of them was in San Francisco. Have you played the garage of the Flop House or whatever in San Francisco?
Oh, everyone's partied in Sylvan House at some point or another in San Francisco, and it's a very life altering experience, and many people aren't the same after leaving. But it was well when Ali was doing comedy in San Francisco, like she was always out and about, so it was just a matter of time. If you were booked on a show, or if you were regularly booked, eventually your paths would cross. There's one major club in San Francisco, and that's the Punchline.
Yeah.
And they didn't have an open mic night per se, but they had a local showcase on Sundays
Good.
where they would randomly put 20 comics on stage any given night. So
Wow.
what everyone in San Francisco would do, all the comics would do, is they would go to the Sunday night Punchline and wait in the back of the room and hope that the booker would come by and say like, "Hey, you're going to go up in 2, you're going to go up in 3," or like, "Hey, Mark's up now, you're going to go up right after him." And then
Wow.
you think, "Oh shit, okay, great." And then they say, either 5 to 7 minutes. So, it's all of the material that you've been working on at that point. And, it's like the biggest club in San Francisco. And it's also
Wow.
a deciding factor, if you do well enough at the Sunday night showcase, they'll ask you to do it again. And then maybe 5 or 6 times doing that, you can get an audition. And from there, if you do well enough hosting, then, you can become a paid regular.
And then none of that translates out to, those credits don't transfer to New York City, do they?
Absolutely not. No. And
So what
it's
was that
so
like?
funny.
Did you start just kind of hustling with open mics in New York City, or what'd you do?
Well, it's like yeah, it's like it's not like the status transfers over, but all the skills you amassed
Oh yeah,
certainly do.
absolutely.
So it wasn't like I was rediscovering like how am I funny? It wasn't rediscovering that. It's like, okay, I know I at this point, I've been doing comedy for 10 years. I have a very strong sense of myself. I know who I had some connections in New York at the time because New York comedians come to San Francisco every once in a while, and San Francisco comics go to New York. It's a good cross pollination. So I had enough of an understanding of stand up comedy that I knew like, okay, I need to go to mics. I need to go frequently so people will recognize my face and my act. I need to, go to showcases and have a presence there so people see I'm out and about and I know there's a hierarchy here. But, you still have to pay your dues. I came out here with a lot of comics in San Francisco who were probably even further along than I was, but they didn't want to put in the time at open mics in New York City because they're like, oh, I don't get anything out of open mics, and hey, sorry about that, man, but I get a lot. And there's people
Yeah.
with television credits that will go to an open mic and put their name in a bucket, and have to wait to get pulled out just like everyone else. And like, I don't have a TV credit, so why
Yeah.
would I be more deserving of not having to put my name? Because I got passed at a comedy club at 3,000 miles away.
I love
It made
that.
a lot of times, like, yeah, getting passed at clubs just means like you have connections, or you put in enough time that you have like a level of talent, but that doesn't necessarily mean like you're God's gift to comedy and like you should be passed everywhere. You still have to pay dues and let people know, like make people know that they made a good investment by
Uh,
booking you.
well, I love the attitude that, it must be just, it's so nice that you had the presence of mind to see that, hey, if this person with television credits is putting his name in a bucket, then I'm not too big for this. That's
Oh
just,
yeah,
the peer-to-peer connection is super important. And it sounds like that's what you're doing in post, or I guess in Corona isolation, and you'll be
yeah,
doing these Zoom shows and things, and they can see, you're I follow you on Twitter at Joe W. Gorman, but also
yes,
the
sir.
the Loud Boys Pod is on Twitter. I follow them as well, and it sounds
Oh,
like
right on, man.
you're with Dalton Pruitt and Robbie Goodwin.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. And then where can they, are you on Eventbrite as far as these Zoom shows coming up, or where can people register so that they can get the link?
Oh man, just follow me on Facebook. I'll always post a link on my Facebook. There's no charge. It's purely donation based. I have a Venmo up there. Any money from those, it goes to the comics. It goes to paying for the premium Venmo that lets us have all these people. But it's really just about making connections with people. And if you can't donate, that's fine. Like the last thing I want to do is prevent someone from laughing in a time like this. And hey, as
And
long as you're
just
paying attention to me, that's all that really matters.
just make sure you're laughing demonstratively with your hands, and so that Joe Gorman knows you're laughing.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, I enjoyed this peer-to-peer connection, and Joe Gorman, I just want to say thank you so much for kind of coming on and teaching us about how comedy is changing over time, and I look forward to I'm gonna go ahead and friend you on Facebook, and hopefully that will be a follow as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Brian. Thanks for
Cool.
having me.
Cool. Thanks, Joe.
All right.